This presentation today is called Aging with a TBI, Managing Health, Function, and Happiness Later in Life. I'm Amanda Rabinowitz. I am the project director of the Moss Traumatic Brain Injury Model System and associate director of Moss Rehabilitation Research Institute. My background is in clinical neuropsychology, and I have been working in brain injury rehabilitation research now for over 10 years. And a lot of my research focuses on understanding long-term consequences of traumatic brain injury. So not just what happens in those immediate weeks and months, but years later, and how people continue to grow and change, and sometimes face challenges, and sometimes face new opportunities. I'm very happy today to be co-presenting with Victor Friesen, who I will allow him to introduce himself. And I came to know Victor just a little bit through some of the research that we do in my lab at Moss Rehabilitation Research Institute. Victor, would you mind just standing up and introducing yourself now?
Ta-da!
And Victor is participating today as a person with lived experience in traumatic brain injury. He will share his stories and some of his lessons learned. But I would love for us all to engage during this session. So Victor, if you see something on my slides that you want to add to, feel free to do so. And I'm happy to also take questions as we go along. So why does this topic matter? Why talk about aging with a brain injury? Well, as I suggested, the effects of traumatic brain injury can persist, so they can continue for many years, or they can even emerge later on in life. Also, older adults are at a higher risk of sustaining a traumatic brain injury in the first place. Falls are a very common cause of traumatic brain injury, and fall risk increases with age for a variety of factors. It's important to talk about this because as we age and our social roles and our goals change, having a TBI can bring challenges to being along on that journey, but it can also lead to opportunities for finding ways to continue to lead a fulfilling life. So I'm going to try to bring some of the insights we have from research to this talk, but this talk is really meant more to be about speaking to the experiences that people have and what are some practical pieces of advice that you can actually apply to your life. So what do we know about the aging brain and traumatic brain injury? Well, there are normal effects of aging on the brain, right? As we get older, we notice that our thinking slows a little bit. We can't answer questions as quickly as we used to. Words might be more difficult to find. Our memory for the things that we mean to do or things that we just did isn't as sharp as it is when we're in our 20s and 30s. And this is just something we know. The brain continues to mature throughout life, and at some point, some of those cognitive faculties that are on an upward trajectory, they start to decline, and that's normal, and it happens to everybody. Thankfully, that comes along with our wisdom going up, 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 right? And that continues to happen. So some of the aging effects of the brain are positive ones that we should actually relish and value. So everyone's aging and everybody's slowing down a little bit. Memory can become more of a challenge. TBI can make that process more accelerated. So TBI can worsen a pre-injury cognitive challenge. And it can also, we know, increase vulnerability to mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. I mentioned that there's an increased risk of TBI among older adults, and let me see if I can figure out how to use my. No, see, I'm too old to do this, but we know that TBI has what we call a bimodal distribution, and that's a fancy way of saying there's two peaks in our risk for a TBI across the lifetime. One of those happens when we're in our adolescence and early adulthood and more likely to be doing things like driving fast, doing risky things that could, doing the stupid stuff that is a characteristic of youth, right? And then we get another peak 65 plus, there's an increased risk of TBI in older adults for those reasons I said, because of falls. And falls are related to reduced muscle strength, slower reaction time, and balance issues. Factors that increase risk of falls are things like osteoporosis, visual impairments, and also medications that can affect coordination. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit today is setting up your life so that you live in an accessible and safe environment where you're less likely to have some of these risks. I mentioned there's also folks aging with TBI because they had an injury earlier in life, and an injury from earlier in life may have lasting effects and can also lead to later effects that you start to notice as we age. So these are some of the challenges, and maybe people relate to some of these. Cognitive challenges like memory loss, problems with attention, decision-making difficulties, physical challenges like balance, coordination, and mobility issues, risk of future injuries. So once you have a TBI, you're at greater risk for another TBI. And then the emotional changes like depression and anxiety. So those are some of the issues. Victor, at this point, do you want to share if there's any of these things that resonate with you?
Well, especially the cognitive. That's what's affected me so much. Loss, essentially, ordinary cognitive functioning, which I always just took for granted, and now I can't. Now I have to think, okay, where am I going? How am I getting there? And what do I have to do? And what are my goals today? And that's led me to a number of things to try to compensate.
Right.
It's basically cognitive for me.
Cognitive.
I've been very happy with that way.
Yeah, we have a question, yes.
Does a TBI necessarily lead to complications with dementia and stuff like that as you get older?
That's a great question. So I'm going to repeat the question for the recording. And the question was, does having a TBI automatically lead to complications like dementia later on? And this has been a topic of a lot of research. There's great interest in understanding the relationship between traumatic brain injury and dementia. And it is a risk factor. So having a TBI is associated with a higher risk of having dementia later on. But you asked if it directly leads to that, and it does not. We know it does not. So when I say it's a risk factor, it's one factor that also, among many, like your genetics, that plays a big role. Also lifestyle factors and other forms of health. So, and that's something that I will talk about more today, because there's some things that we can't change. We can't change, we had an injury. We can't change the genes that we were born with. But that's a small piece of the pie, and there's a lot of other pieces of the pie, and we'll talk about what some of those factors are that can be protective against dementia later in life, but it's a great question. So I mentioned risk of falls and that having had a TBI puts you at greater risk of having a future injury. So some things to think about in terms of what are those things that you can change to increase your health and function, considering your space. So home accessibility and mobility. Is your house accessible? Can you safely navigate to meet your daily needs? And think about both within the home, so the things you have to do in the home, where is the laundry, how is your kitchen set up? Also the things that you need to do outside of the home to do your basic daily needs. How do you go grocery shopping? Thinking about those factors of setting things up in a way that is easiest for you to navigate, that it makes your environment as safe as possible. So you can improve your home accessibility, and people who work with OTs and PTs, so occupational therapists and physical therapists, can give good recommendations for ways to set up your home environment to make it as safe and as functional as possible, because the safer it is, the more independent you can be, the more things you can do on your own. And there are sometimes modifications like ramps and handrails and things that can be added. And there's always a little bit of vanity in that, right? Like, why do I need this special adaptive thing in my home? But the reason for it is to stay as independent as possible, as long as possible. And then thinking about what support you do need in terms of social support and caregiver support in your home and in your community to help you do the things that you need to do. Victor, are there any things on this list that resonate with you about considering your home environment?
Self-awareness, I'm sorry.
That's okay, and I'm sorry I don't have multiple.
Self-awareness plays a huge part. The idea that you have to realize what you can't do anymore. Basically, come to grips with it. And then figure out, okay, is there a way to compensate for this? Is there a way to get around it? No, I can't go up the stairs. That's just the way it is, right? I have to get a glider, something like that. But you have to admit, okay, this happened to me. This is how it affected me. This is what I have to do. And go from there. I think that's one of the most important.
Other thoughts or questions about that? Some of us in the room might be caregivers for, in various roles in our lives, and there is an impact on caregivers, and it's important for people who are providing support to get that support themselves in the ways that they need. So emotional, physical, and financial support is important for caregivers to be able to stay in a caregiving role as long as they need to. So just as we talk about coping with emotions and finding strategies for people with brain injury, all of those same principles are also important for caregivers. I'm going to talk a little bit more on research, what we know from research about aging with traumatic brain injury, and it gets back to some of the questions and topics we've already discussed. So related to the gentleman's question, there is an increased risk of neurodegenerative conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, in people who have a history of TBI. And there's a potential for cognitive decline to accelerate in those with TBI. I have this picture here of the heart and the brain holding hands, and I love this little cartoon because your brain is the leading consumer of oxygen in your body. It's the biggest metabolic expense in the whole human body. 20% of your blood flow goes to your brain. So what's good for your heart is good for your brain. Cardiovascular fitness is one of the best things you can do to increase your brain health longer in life. And this little cartoon is how I remember it. And so I always like to put it in any of my talks like this. So anything you do that gets your heart pumping, and it doesn't have to be vigorous physical activity. You don't have to play pickleball. You don't have to go on the basketball court, but even taking a walk or moving around in any way that you can move, if it gets your blood pumping, it's good for your brain. So this is part of that, lowering your dementia risk, lowering the risk for these conditions. And even there's research that shows that people who've already begun to experience cognitive decline have reversed it with cardiovascular exercise. So this is my favorite thing to tell people, because you talk about these are the things I can't change. This is something that almost everybody can change, is to be a little bit more active. Yes, Victor, and I gave up on the mic.
I was gonna suggest everybody should have their heart tested. My heart stopped 2 years ago, and it's called cardiac arrest. And what saved my life is I was at the gym. But I hadn't been there. 96% of people just fall over and you're gone. That's just the way it is. There's no alert, no sudden, oh, I'm dying. I just fell over. And this happens every day. And think about the main arteries is that most of the time, we don't know if they're blocked. And my father died of a heart attack. My grandfather died of a heart attack. And this can happen to anybody, anytime. It's in the family. So please have your cardiac tested, checked, because we really need our hearts. It's just, that's it. Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Victor. So this is the takeaway. There's one of the key findings from NIH funded research, other studies, is that the lifestyle choices you make can have a positive impact on brain health over time. And that includes things like physical activity, exercise, diet, sleep. So those types of factors. So healthy aging with TBI. Let's talk a little bit about physical health. Regular exercise, I mentioned, cardiovascular exercise, also strength, flexibility, and balance. These are the factors that prevent a fall, that prevent a second injury. And we know that second injuries can be that even at a lower level of impact, your second injury can be severe because you've already had an initial injury. So you really want to protect against having subsequent brain injuries, and strength, flexibility, and balance are ways to make sure that you're going to prevent those. Nutrition, so the Mediterranean diet, brain healthy foods, anything that your doctor would tell you is good for you, giving yourself some good healthy fuel for your brain. And, Victor said this, get your heart checked, the importance of medical management. So preventing further injuries and managing your health conditions. The healthier the rest of your body is, the more your blood is pumping to your brain, the healthier your brain is. So thinking about all of those other secondary conditions, blood pressure, diabetes management, managing those conditions can help improve your cognition, improve your mood, and all those other factors. Yes.
I'll just mention one more thing. They told me after the operation that my main arteries were 96% blocked. 96%. And it was just a matter of time. You're gone. So please check it.
And sometimes it's scary to go and get those workups and get everything checked, but it's the knowledge is power, right? Because
Yes.
once you have that information, you can make these choices. Yes.
He's saying to check your heart. What does he mean by check your heart?
The cardiacs, the main arteries to your heart.
So that's a
EEG?
great question. So concretely, going to your primary care doctor, getting blood work done, asking for a regular physical checkup, making sure you're getting your age appropriate health screens. Start with your primary care doctor. If you still see a brain injury doctor, like a physiatrist, if you have a connection from when you were in rehab, talk to them about what are the health tests that I should do to make sure that my heart's okay, to check my balance. It's a great question. Concretely, what does that mean? And I think starting with a primary care doctor
Yes.
or your brain injury doctor and getting the right tests that they recommend.
Okay.
I'll also add to that,
Yes.
Victor mentioned family history. He had a very significant
Yeah.
family history. So this is especially important if you have a family history.
Absolutely.
Brain injury will add to that risk. So tell your doctor about your family.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll say that just loudly for everybody. If you have a family history, if you know that a parent or grandparent or an uncle or aunt has had a history of one of these conditions, make sure your doctor knows that because that will help them decide what you need to be screened for. And maybe you need to be screened for it a little bit earlier than somebody else would. So that's important
Yes.
information. Healthy aging with TBI, let's talk about cognitive health, the everyday thinking skills. So staying cognitively engaged is very important, and it's important throughout the lifespan, and it's important after brain injury. So doing mental activities like, if you enjoy puzzles, that's great. If learning new skills, continuing to say, okay, I'll try that instrument or I'll try to learn this new skill. Doing those things is keeping your mind engaged and it's good for you. Social engagement is also incredibly important. One of the takeaways is when I started training, we talked about like brain games a lot and doing these sort of more cognitive skills, like things you might do in school or something on the back of a cereal box. And that's fine. If you like doing those things, that's good. But it's actually being physically in the world and socially connected is really good for your brain too. It's probably better than even some of those brain games. So stay socially connected, finding ways to interact with your friends and family, finding new social opportunities. That's very good for your brain. There's positive effects of lifelong learning. There's also cognitive rehabilitation strategies that we can continue to enact in our everyday life. Maybe you've learned some of these things and maybe you haven't, but using a planner, setting reminders, putting visual aids in your home, these are the things that set you up for success. It's not a sign of weakness if you need to write everything down. It's a sign of strength because now you have that list you'll go back to and you'll get those things done. So not every system works right for everybody. Some people like paper, some people like using their phones to keep track of things, but take the time to find a system that works for you to help you keep track of the things that you want to do throughout your day. You can also, it's easy to get overwhelmed by big tasks, by big projects. Got to organize the kitchen. I've got this pile of papers in the other room. Look at all this mail piled up. I got to pay bills. You look at the big pile of things and it's overwhelming and you don't want to go anywhere near it. Breaking tasks into smaller steps, saying, I'm just going to look through these 2 pieces of mail today and I'll leave the rest tomorrow. Or I'm just going to spend 10 minutes on cleaning up and then I'll get back to it some other time. that helps you manage those tasks. It's a way to chip away and get started. So this is something that can help everybody, but especially as we age after a brain injury, the capacity, the endurance, it might not be what it used to be. So breaking things into smaller steps makes it more manageable. And maybe you have a technique that you've learned, like mindfulness, like deep breathing, like relaxation. That sets the right tone to do. So we're not at our best when we go into something and we're already stressed and we're already at a 10. Finding a way to put yourself in the right space so you can actually tackle those things you want to do sets you up for success. Victor, do you have anything to add about these cognitive?
I'll mention some of the things that I
That's
try to
right.
do. I'll mention them when I.
Okay, when we get to, that's perfect.
Amanda, can I say something?
Yes.
You back to the slide?
Sure.
I'm a faculty member here at Jefferson.
Right.
So when we are elected psychology department, so we're looking at the research on thriving.
Yes.
The best predictor that somebody's going to report that their life has meaning and satisfaction is that social engagement.
Yes.
That you have people that they can feel safe and vulnerable. That is the best predictor of a meaningful life. So that is so essential.
Thank you for underlying that. And I have these 3 take-home messages at the end, and the social engagement is so big. And I think it's the more that we do research on this, the more powerful we're coming to appreciate that it is. And it's not like your social life is different from your emotional health, and it's different from your physical health, and it's all connected. So being able to find ways to stay socially engaged is really critical. So I appreciate you underlining that point. Is there a question over here?
No, I was just confirming what he was
Yeah.
stating as correct, because my accident was 5.5 years ago. I had a severe traumatic brain injury, and so I didn't want people to look at me. I didn't talk. I wasn't like I was prior to the accident. And then because obviously I wanted to start walking better. I forced myself to go to the gym for a half hour, and now I go to the gym 5 days a week for like 2.5, 3 hours, which I shouldn't. I know that's a little bit much, but I do, and I go to chair high yoga 2 times a week. So that's socialization. I have a family all around, and
it's like you're not just being active and getting that exercise, but you're also around other people. So you're getting the best of both
stimulates
of them.
me in a healthy way, like I agree with what you're saying and him.
Great. And I lost my train.
I'm so
So
sorry.
a lot of these things also, I mean, we talk about this, it's a double whammy, because as we get older, there's a higher risk of social isolation. And after a brain injury, there's a higher risk of social isolation. So finding ways to stay connected is so important. Maintaining emotional well-being. So there was a whole session on this today, so I don't want to belabor it, but coping with anxiety, depression, and anger, finding ways to cope with these emotions. And I was in Christina's talk earlier. They don't go away, but you cope with them and you learn to increase the positive emotions. Therapy, mindfulness, stress reduction techniques, these are all things that we can do to help manage our emotional health. And social support, as we've all said many times. So adapting to change. Resilience is thriving, is finding ways to adapt in the face of challenges. And I think that for those who got to see our keynote speaker this morning, hear some of the words of inspiration from our panels. Thriving after a great challenge is possible. There are positive role models or examples. That doesn't mean it's easy, and that doesn't mean that all you need to do is, see an inspirational talk and you can go and, follow Jennifer's path. But finding new hobbies and activities that can accommodate the challenges that we're facing is the key to resilience. So maybe the way that you live your values looks different than it would have 10, 20 years ago. Maybe the way that you live your values is different from the way it looked before your injury. But you can always find a way to live your values. And this is what I think is the key to having those resilient experiences, is adapting to those changes. And I think that you're going to talk a little bit about that, Victor, as well. The power of positive thinking, you know, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. But hopefulness, finding hope, finding positive reinterpretation and growth in the face of challenge is associated with having better outcomes. So it really is fake it till you make it, right? You get your mind right, and then you're more likely to find a way to be that best version of you. And we talked about proactive health management. So Victor, I would love to turn it over to you. At this point, I'll stay up here with you. And we can kind of, and I'm happy to facilitate, but I know that you have some experiences that you wanted to share with our audience.
Oh, thank you so much. So I'll try not to make a complete idiot of myself. Here goes. So, first thing I want to mention, and this is for the end of the talk. Greatest invention, creation, innovation in the entire history of the human race, going back 6 million years. It wasn't fire. Fire was already here. Greatest creation, invention, innovation in our entire history up to the present day. Think about it. We'll talk about it maybe a little bit after this, but just give it a thought. So where are we? I do have to apologize for my memory and speaking, because this has affected me from my brain injury 4 years ago. I was on my bicycle, hit by a car, and knocked unconscious. Traumatic brain injury. And welcome to the club. This is what we are. And one of the things that I had to deal with initially was that I thought I was alone. This is the way it is. Oh shit. You're gonna have to deal with it. You're on your own. And it took me a while to realize there are many of us. We're all struggling. We all have things that we are showing ourselves to do, and plays an huge role in our lives. And I can guarantee you, we need others. We need our families. We need our friends. Don't isolate yourself. Don't stay in the house and not go out, because that way you're just going to crush yourself to depression. You have to stay social. You have to stay active. You have to stay with your families. That's absolutely critical. A lot of people that don't come to these things simply isolated. They're not going to come. And that's it. You never hear from them. So much for that. So 900,000 years ago, to change the topic.
No.
What happened? Well, something interesting. We were all in North Africa. All of us. We were the Cro-Magnon species 900,000 years ago. And anybody know what happened?
Migrated.
Well, they tried to, but something else happened first. The population dropped to about 1,000. That's this close to extinction. 900,000 years ago, we almost extinguished ourselves the species. We were extremely lucky. Actually survived. What's the current population in the United States and the world at this point? Our whole population. Anybody?
6 billion, 6 billion,
8 billion.
8 billion.
8 billion. 8 billion. Predicted population, 75 years. 113 billion. Oh, sorry, 13 billion. 13 billion. Predicted population. Welcome to the world. This is what's going to happen to our children and grandchildren. And I worry about it. But I also worry about our country, how we're going to survive and how we're going to do. And this is the way it is. But at the same time, we can adjust. We can cope. Because that's what we're doing now. We're coping.
Do you have any examples of things that you have adapted to as a result of your
Yes.
injury in ways that you
Yes.
have continued to
Loss
find?
of memory has been very critical for me. I have to write things down. I have to make notes. What to do today? What do I have to get at the store? Don't forget about getting the cheese. Write it on a note. Sorry, I never used to do that. Now it's routine. Names. What's the name of this person? I can't remember. I heard the name. It's gone. This happens with us. Memory is one of the first things that retreats. There's a lot of other things that go along with it, but we can get really annoyed and scared about this and think, Jesus, my brain's gone. I can't do anything about it. You can. You can cope with it. You can write things down because we're the only species on Earth who write a note and we read it. Language. We can talk, we can speak, and interact with each other. We can communicate. We have phones. We have computers. We have enormous amounts of information.
Do you have ways that you have adapted, because we talked about the cognitive, which is great. With the social, you're talking about reaching out and connecting. Are
Yes.
there ways that you stay socially
Yes.
engaged?
I make not appointments, I make dates with people. I'll meet you for coffee. We'll have breakfast together. Get out, do this, because we are the most social species on the planet, bar none. I mean, that's just the way we were born. That's the way we were raised.
And making the dates, I really like what you said about that, because sometimes you have to plan these things. Because,
Yes.
for some of us, we might have had times in our life where the social interaction was spontaneous. We were around family all the time, or in a work environment, or in a different situation. But planning that, I will see this person, I will talk to, maybe even planning just to call someone on the phone, right? And putting it down, making a note so you remember to do it, and following through.
And making a date.
And making a date ensures that you're going to get that social connection.
Yes, because the automatic response to this kind of accident is to withdraw. Hold back. Say, I'm not doing that anymore. Don't do that. When we self-isolate, it brings on depression and anxiety even worse. And that's up enough as we are, because anxiety and depression are our two biggest problems. They're there, period. I've been on medication for depression and anxiety for 4 years since my accident. I'm gradually withdrawing, thanks to my psychiatrist. But I was able to say, this is crushing me. And you help me get through this. The medication doesn't cure the problem. It backs it down so you can recover. So you can have time to make better differences. But it doesn't cure, quote unquote. You have to push that yourself. But at least it gives you time and a promotion of being able to do this, of staying with it. Don't quit. Quitting it happens every day. There were a couple of times where I thought, I just want to quit. This is too much. And I was able, because of my family and friends, to push myself not to do that, to stay motivated. It made a difference.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And there's one other area from the presentation that I'd love for you to touch on. You were part of a research project that had to do with being physically active. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you could speak a little bit to ways to be active that,
Yes.
might require some adaptation or some different ways of thinking about it, but how do you stay active?
Well, one of the things that I did, which was critical, is after my bike accident, I went back to bicycling. This is after a year and a half. I got a new bicycle. Thank you. And now I do not go on roads. Okay, it's trails only. Obviously, the roads are just too dangerous. Too dangerous all over this country, and especially near the cities. And the other thing that I've done is to do dumb things like crossword puzzles, word games, things that stimulate my memory, that push me to think about, oh, what does that really mean? What is that problem? How do I figure that out? Push yourself to do something that you're not ordinarily pushing yourself to do something different. Keep your mind active and going and compensate, because otherwise we tend to withdraw, like I said, and pull ourselves down. That's human nature. Welcome to it. Gotta overcome it. You gotta push. Please do it.
Thank you. That was great. Does anybody have any comments on anything? Yes.
I just have a question. So I'm dealing with an elderly mother who had a stroke. She's gonna be 90, so she has a lot going against her with that. How do I approach her? Like, I'm the bad person because she is forgetting and things. Any suggestions on something I could? My brother and sister just like, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to be a part of a talk or anything with her. She's still highly functioning, but she just has her moments. Any way to like make her aware of this? Or
How's her memory?
some days good, other times I hid something from her because she can't find it, and then but she will find it. So it's starting, but it's not to the point where we need to put her somewhere. First off, she has the left side paralysis, so she's not walking out of the house and being unsafe. So she's totally safe. I know we can make life better for her, but she needs to be more accepting first.
It's a challenge, and sometimes and especially it's easy to get frustrated with family members because you see something that they don't see. It's not a case of being able to present them with the argument and you're going to convince them, right? First of all, that's not how family works in my experience. But a lot of times, part of the condition might mean that they don't see the same way that you do, right? And you're not gonna argue their brain into working differently. So that's not easy, right? It's not easy because you want to get that acceptance and that buy-in. But I think trying to find gentle ways to support instead of convince.
And that's what we've been doing.
Right.
I just didn't know. if
I know,
something
I know,
else.
and then maybe, you know, and then sometimes enlisting the help of a healthcare professional if there's a doctor or, yeah, that might, it might sound different coming from them. That's not always the right route either. It sounds like you're doing the things that you can, but you know, gently putting those things in the environment and trying to help support her the best you can. And, you know, and sometimes doing the thing that will make her safer is going to be the thing that she's going to resent. And it's just, and that's a hard thing to take.
I was
Yeah.
gonna ask you, how is she socially?
Well, she was living by herself for years, and the only people that ever came to visit was me and my kids. So, and I was working 2 jobs at the time and had
Yeah.
3 kids in high school still. So, but we since then have moved in with her because she refused to go to any kind of assisted living, and so she even got better with that because when Heather had her accident, we brought a 12-year-old into the house. So all of a sudden she had somebody to care for. And that really helped a lot. So then, you know, now I'm there and take her, come, let's go to the grocery store, you know,
Can I
that.
ask you something else? Is there any kind of involvement with church, synagogue,
She
social
won't, she
activity?
won't anymore because it's more of a challenge for her to get out. She doesn't want to use her wheelchair.
Yeah.
Which is everything needs to walk now.
We got a puppy she loves.
Yeah, that was it. That was a huge,
Yeah.
that was a huge thing.
And I wish I had that up there for social engagement, you know, animals count.
Definitely, it definitely did make a
That's
huge
that's
change.
social support and I don't
Cats and
need,
dogs.
I don't need to tell people that who have beloved pets that those can
Yeah, she
provide a
definitely
lot of.
became like a therapy dog for her, really. So that's it. And then, I mean, she lives on the phone with her sisters, so
Okay.
that's another
Good.
positive. But it's just some of the forgetting, only because she can get very mean
Yeah,
and.
we'll battle in a way because she's the way she is, and then, oh, Heather has a TBI, you know, she just forgot, no, girl, we forgot, no, I gotta be
I
good.
do have to tell the 2 of them, stop.
Oh.
Your grandma go.
Graham.
Yeah, but sometimes it's gonna be like shifting your own mindset a little bit and saying this part she might not get, you know?
It is, and
Yeah.
it's just easier on everybody. I just didn't know if maybe I was
No.
missing
I
something.
know. Well, and get the support that you need, right? That's the caregiver support.
Mhm.
It's you taking care of yourself is what's gonna allow you to be in a position where you can take care of other people.
Is there anybody else who has any questions about themselves, their family, struggling with this, hoping, anything like that? Please ask away.
You can think about that. I'll just point out some of the conclusions and
Okay.
key takeaways from what we discussed today. And I thank you so much, Victor, for contributing and everybody.
I
Yeah.
have a question, you can finish with that. I have a question for you, Victor. So do you want me to ask that now?
Go ahead.
Okay, and this came up in Jennifer Lynn's talk this morning too, so I just wanted to talk about getting back into something that may have been potentially traumatic for you, because you mentioned you had your bike accident, but you biked again. I also know, because I know you, that after you had your cardiac arrest at the gym, but you're actually also back at the gym, right? Yeah. And Jennifer Lynn mentioned this morning that she is back on
To the
campus.
campus where.
And that's not, I just want to highlight that and ask you about your experience about, you know, you said it took you a while to do that. Was there anything, how difficult was that?
I had help with it.
Okay,
My daughters helped me go back to bike.
okay.
They helped me get a bicycle.
Yeah.
And they went out
Uh-huh.
on the trail. And the same thing happened with my heart attack, is that, you know, I had to push myself to get back into exercise. Basically, do this as a way of not only compensating, but getting past the anxiety.
Right, right. So that's, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's
The anxiety is overwhelming.
right, but you were able to overcome that with time.
Well, my daughter's help and so forth. Yes, it makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. Let's put it this way, we all need help. All of us, we all need help. We can't do this alone. If we're trying to do it alone, we're gonna sink. That's just what happened. So don't. Get help, Do what you have to do this with others. Get introduced to it, reintroduce, whatever it is. But this is critical. This is life. Okay? The strange thing about life is it doesn't want to help you. It just wants to be there. It'll be there or not, but it depends on you. What you do about it. That's what it comes down to.
Great, thank you.
Good job.
So just to wrap up, we have, these are my major takeaways, the positive outlook. Aging with the TBI presents challenges, but with the right strategies, you can maintain health, happiness, and function. Stay active, stay mentally engaged, and socially connected. Active, mentally engaged, socially connected. Those are the three areas. Caregiver support is crucial. Access available resources and keep learning. And aging is a journey. Everybody's journey is different, but everybody has the ability to thrive. It's not going to look the same for everybody. It might not look the way you imagined it would look 10, 20 years ago, but everybody has the ability to thrive in their way. And this is my take-home graphic: active, engaged, connected. Those are the
Yes.
three things to do. And I think we have about 7 minutes if we have any other questions.
Two more things.
Please do.
I want to thank the people who put this together today. Because it made a difference. Otherwise, we're alone. It's just happening, tough shit. Now, I get a sense of belonging, of what happened and what to do about it. The second thing is greatest invention, creation, innovation
Oh,
in the history
yeah.
of the human
Yeah.
I
race.
forgot about that. Yeah.
Family.
Family.
Anybody else? Greatest invention, creation, innovation, our entire history.
I might be way off, but I was thinking the wheel.
The wheel.
Yes.
That's a pretty good one, yeah.
I led to a lot of stuff.
Like language or something?
Nice. Anybody else? Caring. Caring. Yes. Caring makes a huge difference. Otherwise, we're completely alone. And that's the way it is. Anybody else? I have two solutions, but I'll say them later.
Community.
Community.
Community. Absolutely critical. Without community, where are we? We're alone. We're not here. We're out there somewhere. That's it. I own two things. And this, I think, goes back to the beginning. Almost the beginning, actually. Maybe the Cro-Magnon series. Language. Without language, where are we? Lost. And completely alone. Without language, we have no communication, no interaction, no feelings, no thoughts, no progress. Also, music. Every day I listen to music. Anybody else? Music, because it makes a difference. It really does. We are the only species that has ever created music. The birds sing, yes, but they're talking. That's what they do. We have music. I listen every day. And I welcome it. It makes a difference. It makes things easier. Thank you.